just so happened to be talking to the top featherweight in Australia, New Zealand. His name is Justin Lockjaw Van Heerden, and he joins me today. Champ, welcome back to my show, man. It's been a minute since I've had the pleasure to spend some time with you. I'm excited to chop it up with you again on this great summer morning.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it. It's been a minute, like you said, but yeah, it's good to be back. Good to be talking about all things pertaining to what we're interested in, and that's fighting.
Yes, sir. It is definitely fighting. And specifically in this case, it is Australian MMA. And we would be remiss to not talk about the biggest UFC card that I could ever recall heading down your way. UFC 284 happens on 11 February in Perth, opposite side of the country for you. But that's got to be something that everybody in Australia is absolutely buzzing about. I'm sure when you heard the news, you were really excited as well.
Yeah, man, 100%. And I think, yeah, like you said, everyone that's a fan of MMA and people that are like fans of the UFC, you can just see it everywhere on social media and stuff like that. People are just going crazy and they're super excited. And I'm seeing like in some of the MMA groups and forums and that like people are just going crazy when it comes to like the ticket releases and stuff like that. So everyone's obviously pumped up, everyone's excited. And it's like, yeah, a bit overdue, it's been like what, 3 4 years since they've done a show here. So it's, yeah, obviously everyone's been hanging out for it. And as much as I guess people are getting their MMA fix by going to some of the local promotions and stuff like that and watching shows, and attending Eternal and stuff like that, you know to go to the UFC and see some of the top fighters in the world compete and perform up close is always going to stand out. So I think people are, yeah, definitely excited. I'm excited as a fan, just as a fan, I'm excited. Um, yeah, there's so much happening and the cards are already looking like really, really good.
What excites me most about it is it's an opportunity for Australia to demonstrate how far the sport has come down there. You look at these guys. Occasionally, you'll see cards, for example, if like the UFC, not that they would, but let's just pretend that the UFC would go to Germany. They might scoop up some German guys that probably don't belong in the UFC just for the purposes of throwing them on this card. You can't say
Mm.
this about this one. Every single one of these guys, I believe they do belong in the UFC. Some of the best fighters in the world are from your area, your neck of the woods. I think the only, with the exception of the co-main event that is between a Mexican and an American, everyone else on this card has either an Australian fighter on it or a New Zealander in Kai Kara
Mm.
France's case. Every single one of these fights has somebody that's, like I said, Australian or New Zealander. I think that's massive.
That alone, just being able to do that shows you that in the last 4 years, how many people have made that jump and then how much the level of the sport has risen to that point. Just to be able to say that you have that many Australians or Kiwis fighting on one card.
There are two bouts specifically I want to talk to you about because you have insider knowledge. But there's one fight in particular I'm circling that I have insider knowledge on, and you have insider knowledge on. It's a featherweight scrap between Jack Jenkins going up against Don Shanis. I think we can have an information exchange here because you know everything that there is to know about Jenkins. I know a little thing or two about Don Shanis. Let's start with Jack Jenkins. He's a guy you were scheduled to fight him a couple different times. Bout was never able to materialize. Can you talk about, for the Americans up here who didn't catch the Contender Series fight, can you talk a little bit about Jack Jenkins? I know he's been a staple in the Australian MMA scene, well-known fighter down your way. Can you just comment, like, briefly, what can people expect when they see a guy like Jack Jenkins fight?
Yeah, Jack's he's a big, he's like a powerful guy. He's got really good striking, really technical striking, high pace, high volume. Likes to put the pressure on and just sort of pick people apart. Doesn't rush when he's in there. Doesn't sort of get overzealous and looking for a finish. Quite happy to sort of just stick to his guns and do what's providing him success to get the result. And if he gets a finish along the way, he gets a finish. But ultimately, if he needs to just pick you apart for 5 rounds and point fight with you, then he's happy to do that. And it's going to be a technical sort of striking battle. He's gonna rise to that. But yeah, like you said, for people that didn't see his Contender Series fight. In that one, he kind of had to switch things up, dig deep, and rely on some wrestling and some grappling. He's a well-rounded mixed martial artist, but I definitely say that his striking and his sort of his gas tank and his striking is probably his biggest weapon, his biggest strengths that he likes to utilize. He's a guy that went on a bit of a tear. Like he started off his pro career with a few wins, and then I think he fought on Hex Fight Series against two international opponents and experienced like back-to-back losses. And I think the guy was in limbo a bit. Was sort of he swapped gyms and then moved to Absolute full time. And then after that, the guy went on a bit of a run. Ended up putting together a 6-fight win streak, won the Eternal Featherweight title, defended it a couple times, and then obviously got his Contender Series opportunity. Was very, very fortunate to get a contract after that fight, even though he did dominate the fight and get a finish. I think being the last show of the series kind of played into his favor a bit, and we saw Dana kind of was a bit apprehensive, but someone obviously said, hey, nah, this guy's got some other skills and abilities he didn't get to show, so they gave him a shot. And now he's got his contract and he's making his debut in Perth. And so I mean, if the Jack Jenkins that the Australian MMA community is used to seeing shows up, you can expect that you're going to see a guy push the pace, look to do lots of damage on the feet, hits hard, lots of power. He's pretty fast, and like I said, he's got a gas tank to just keep going and going. He's pretty. He's got good grappling, good wrestling as well. He's got that in his back pocket. But I mean, like I said, he likes to get his work done on the feet. A fun fact for people that they might not know: before this last fight, I think it was like before the fight on Contender Series, 3 of the 4 people that he fought before that, he actually fractured their leg. So
wow.
Yeah, he's got some he's got some hard leg kicks, some power in his arms and his legs. So if you allow him to sort of dictate that and do his job and just like pretty much pick you apart and play his game on the feet, it's gonna be a shit night for you.
I want to talk a little bit about the American, Don Shainis. It's a guy that I have no doubt a lot of people down your way probably aren't familiar with. If they are, they may have caught his fight against Sadiq Youssef. Youssef was able to find a very, very quick submission against Don, and I don't think the fight lasted all but 15, 20 seconds. But there are a few things about Don. Having followed his career, he's a friend of mine. I consider him a friend of mine. I followed his career for the better part of the past year and some change. And I will say this, he's a very, very scrappy guy. He isn't the biggest guy. You may have heard that somewhere. I would say he's probably identical in size to Volkanovski. Short, stocky, real powerful guy. He's very aggressive, just like your guy, Jack. One thing about Don, when you watch him fight, his cardio is excellent. He never gets tired. He's very aggressive. He's going to push the pace. Where he really shines is his grappling, though. If he gets a hold of you, he's going to make it a really ugly fight, and he's not going to get tired. And if he gets you down to the ground, I don't care how good your get-ups are. I don't care how good your jiu-jitsu is. It may be a long time. It may be a long night for you down on the ground. A lot of guys have fallen victim to that, and they get grounded and pounded, and that's how he's able to win fights. I'm expecting Don to go in there, and if I had to guess, he's probably going to go for that single relatively early. He wants to make this an ugly fight. I think the uglier this fight is, the more it favors Don. He trains with James Krause and all the rest of the guys at Glory MMA in Kansas City, Kansas, or is that Kansas City, Missouri? I don't know. It's a city divided between 2 states. So anyway, I think it's in Missouri. But in any event, know that he is training with the absolute top guys. And if Jack gets a win off Don, that wasn't a gimme fight. That was a well-earned fight. Don Shainis is a very, very talented, a very, very gifted fighter. He had to cut a ridiculous amount of weight to take that fight, and he was not at 100% health, but he was in one of those types of situations where you get the call, you got to do what you got to do, and no one else would fight Youssef, and he did what he had to do in order to get that fight. It should be a very, very exciting matchup. Good luck to both of those Jets. I want to move up the card. We're going to go all the way up to the main event. We would be remiss to not talk about it. This is a fight that I think the entire world wants to watch against Islam Makhachev going up against your man, Alex Volkanovski. It is for the UFC lightweight title. Wow. Crazy to think that we're already talking about like a lightweight title. I'm a little like kind of going back into all this, like the setup for all this. I'm not surprised that Volk is getting the shot, but I am getting surprised that there is going to be an interim 45 champion. That kind of threw me
Yeah.
for a loop a little bit. I wasn't expecting that. Typically, when you see an interim belt, it means that your man's going to be out of action for quite some time. That's not really the case. He's jumping up for one fight, a title fight at that. You know, I thought that was like an opportunity for him to be like the champ potentially. So I was a little bit surprised that when he goes back to 45, it's going to have to be for a unification bout.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of weird, and especially considering like he'd have this fight in February and then be good to go in like April, May to defend the 45 belt. So, like he's dead set serious on the fact that he wants to stay active and, defend both belts and keep both divisions going. And if anyone can do that, it's certainly him. Like, I mean, I think, then that's kind of another thing that I'm trying to sort of emulate and follow as well. It's just like, you got a limited time in this game. You got to find your opportunities, and when they present themselves, you got to take them and you just got to run with them. And he's doing that. But yeah, this is one of those fights, man, where it's like with, especially knowing that, let's be honest, everybody in the world, and especially the people involved in the sport, are probably like sitting there going, nah, he's got no chance. Islam's going to win.
Yeah.
That's going to bring a whole new level out of him. Like, you've seen him get better fight to fight to fight. Even this year, like the last few fights, sort of, you look at him, he's better each fight. And you see what he did to Holloway. Now you're going to expect him to come in there with Islam, and he's going to be levels better again. So, and like people probably don't know, like, Volk's, he used to be like a pretty big dude, man. And he fought at middleweight and he fought at welterweight. And like, he was, he holds his own quite well with bigger people. Like when he's training with bigger guys and he's doing work with bigger guys, like it's a struggle for them to sort of have their way,
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting part about this fight is like, it's going to be, don't get me wrong, it's going to be competitive for the first, early on, it's going to be competitive, right? Because, you're dry and it's early on. Islam's going to be able to, make contact at some point. Him, like, he might get him down. He might get a few takedowns early on, but once Volk starts, defending, getting back to his feet, and, the confidence of Islam starts dropping when he can't control him and keep him on the floor. Now you're forced to stand in front of this guy. Man, it's gonna just lead to like a mental break, and he's just gonna crumble, because for as long as that fight's on the feet in each round, Islam's losing.
Mm-hmm.
Because the separation between the skills on the feet is much bigger than the separation between the grappling and the wrestling. Like, obviously, Islam is a really, really talented mixed martial artist. He's got some decent striking, but, he likes to get his work done with his wrestling and his grappling. And yeah, he's been doing that for like 20 odd years. And he's just, he's a monster. But the gap between him and Volk in that area isn't that big. Whereas in the striking, it's a massive gap. Like Volk's IQ, his distance management, his ability to sort of, make a read on what you're doing, and then he has like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things that he can do to adjust and counter that. And then he switches between, and then he'll make a read that you're adjusting to what he's doing to you. So then he'll adjust to another 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things that he can use to counter that. And it's like, and he's doing that, on the fly constantly. And like, it's like his fight IQ is probably, he's got so many things that are sort of assets and abilities that benefit you as a mixed martial artist, but his fight IQ is probably up there as one of the best in the sport. And you can see it when you're watching these fights and you're seeing the things that he's doing and how he's having a success. And obviously I've got a biased point of view. He is my teammate. He's one of my coaches, and I get to see him on the daily do his work and do his things. So, I'm going to obviously sit there and go, like, he's going to kill it. But even just when I try and separate myself from that, and I look at him just as a fan of the sport and someone who watches fights and gets sort of enthralled by it, there's things that he does in fights that I don't think people can have the appreciation for, because to even just understand what he's doing, and to be able to appreciate it is like, you've got to be someone like, like us, who watches so many fights, who's so invested into the sports, where you can go, holy shit, like, and it makes you go, wow, like this is incredible. Like, we're watching one of the best people to ever do it right now. And don't get me wrong, Islam has those same qualities. He's doing things in there to people that makes you just go, what the hell, man? Like this guy's an absolute freak, and he's got a great team. He's got great coaches behind him. Uh, it's it's certainly an interesting fight, and it's certainly going to be competitive for like the first 2 rounds. But like I said, eventually Volk's going to find he's going to find the solution, and then it's just going to be, he's going to start putting a serious hurting on Islam. And I think, to be honest, I think he puts him away inside 4.
With a win over Islam, in your mind, is he the greatest Australian mixed martial artist of all time?
By far. And if
That
he continues to fight with both belts and defends both belts, and especially if you're defending the lightweight title a few times, man, you got to start putting him in the conversation as the best to ever do it, because he's going to be fighting in 2 stacked weight divisions against absolute killers that are all in their prime. Not
right.
like there's going to be rarely he's rarely going to encounter someone at the moment that's not in their prime. He's like that, and then that in itself is just mental. Like, you can go down the list. Like, he beats Islam, you go down the list, potential people that he could fight at lightweight. You're talking like Benil Dariush, you're talking about Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, some of these absolute monsters. And then you look at the featherweight division, you got people like, obviously you got the Rodriguez matchup potential, you got the Josh Emmett potential, the Arnold Allen, who knows? Max Holloway might throw a spanner in the works, going to beat a few contenders, and then he's back in the mix. I mean, yeah, there's just everyone that's fighting at the moment are just like in the prime of their athletic career in those divisions, and they're completely stacked. So, for someone to then, I guess, risk their position as, like you said, clearly one of the greatest to ever do it already, but you're risking sort of your position in that to go and challenge someone at a higher weight, who's also in his physical prime, who's killing it. It's a crazy, crazy thing. So if he pulls that off, without a doubt, he's the greatest Australian mixed martial artist to ever do it, and certainly cements himself as being one of the best to ever do it.
I am a massive, massive Robert Whitaker fan. But if you told me that, hey, Alex Volkanovski, best Australian mixed martial artist of all time, I wouldn't even get mad at you. I'd be like, I could go with that. But I will say, really excited to see Robert Whitaker fight Paulo Costa.
Yep.
That's on this card as well. He is one of, in my mind, I have him up there. I think he's probably the most exciting mixed martial artist that I know of. Robert Whitaker, I love watching that man fight. Every single thing about him is exciting. I could talk about that guy for days. I would even go as far as to say, now granted, I'm biased because I'm just a fan of him, but when he fought Israel Adesanya, I was just talking, I was just talking about this the other day. I thought he won. I looked at it and I was just like, oh my gosh, I was talking to David Martinez about this. I was like, I don't know, man. Like, at the end of it, I knew that it was going to go Izzy's way, because you really have to put your stamp out there. You really have to like take the guesswork out of it if you're from the blue corner in a title fight. But
Yeah.
now you look back on it now, and if you rewatch that fight, I feel like it was a lot closer than what everyone initially let on.
100%. It was a very close fight. And like, I watched it live. And even live, like when I watched it, I was sitting there afterwards going, man, I don't know. Like, I'd be happy with it going either way. Like, it was very, very close. And if they'd have said Robert Whitaker won, I wouldn't have sat there and gone, oh, wow, what are you doing? Are you crazy? And I mean, being like, even at my last fight when I fought Olavi, at one stage, and I think like just after the fights, I bumped into Eugene at like in the lobby, and I was having a chat to him, and I was like, was that some? I asked him, I was like, was the second fight a surprise to him with how Rob approached it and some of the stuff that he was able to do in the fight? And even Eugene said, he's like, yeah, like Rob certainly made it a much more tightly contested fight than the first one, and that's evident because he got finished in the first fight. So if like we can sit there and watch it back, and I have watched it back since then, and man, I still feel the same way. I know it's hard when you watch a fight live. You get caught up in the theatrics of it all. You get caught up in the moment, and then you obviously, you're gonna watch it live, and you're gonna have a different take. But then when you watch it back, and I always tell people, I'm like, watch the fight back, mute the commentary, and just watch it for what it is. And a lot of the time, you're gonna be like, holy shit, like this is vastly different than I thought it was.
I completely agree, and I know that we're a ways off from it happening, but the thought about Pereira and Whitaker fighting is very, very enticing to me, and I want that matchup if I'm Robert Whitaker. I think if he's offered that fight, he has to jump at it. Just like Wei Lee took advantage of the fact that Rose wasn't the champion. She wasn't going to get a shot anytime soon. She took that
Yeah,
opportunity. She did what she needed to do to beat Carla Esparza convincingly. Now she's the champion again. Robert Whitaker really has to take advantage of the fact that Pereira's the champ, because with Israel being a champion, he's not going to get a three-peat. It isn't going to happen. So we'll see if that fight ever ends up materializing. I want to shift gears though. I want to talk about you because Justin, you've been a very busy man in 2022. This is going to be your fourth fight of 2022. Earlier this winter, you fought Muhammad Alavi. Very, very entertaining fight. But this fight ended exactly the way I knew it would, with you figuring out a way to get a submission victory in the second round. I will say, on Tapology, I have picked every single one of your fights with 100% accuracy, 100 points for me every single time you fight. I know things, Justin. I know things. I knew you were going to manage a way to get a submission victory. I think that's one thing about your game that a lot of people don't really think about initially. You're very tall, you're really rangy, you're really quick, and you give people a lot of things to think about when they are on the feet against you. But when you're grappling with somebody, when you're able to use your grappling skills, if the fight makes it to the ground, I don't think people still realize just how good you are when fights go that way, when you're not striking. And it's interesting to me. No one ever really seems to talk about your submission game other than me. Why is that?
yeah, it's a weird sort of thing because, like, obviously, I started off like with the wrestling background, and then obviously, initially the first sort of thing when I started getting into the MMA side of things before I started fighting, like I started doing some jiu-jitsu. I had my first fight after like 6 months of doing like 6 months of jiu-jitsu training and stuff, and a little bit of striking, but nothing too crazy. So, and then kind of just, build from there. And like, that's a thing though, obviously, like the grappling and the wrestling is a powerful tool that's in my arsenal that I can rely on. Like at the end of the day, I'm trying to, I'm under the guise of Joe and Alex, and I'm the people I train alongside. I'm trying to build myself and develop in all areas, and I think I have done that, and I've shown that fight to fight. And I am like, I think people need to start. I've said that like the last time around too. I was like, people need to realize that like if you step in there with me, like I'm a complete mixed martial artist. It's like doesn't like I'm ready for the fight to take place wherever it needs to take place. But at the end of the day, the separation in what I'm able to do when it comes to the wrestling and the grappling is vastly bigger than what I think people even that do give me the very limited times people do give me credit for that area and those strengths. I don't think they realize how it actually like how much different it actually is until they're in there with me. And even with Alavi, there was like a distinct moment where like after I dropped him in the first round and there was like I kind of was like he shot on me for a takedown. I was kind of like, oh, like this guy's stuck. Like he's wrestling me, and that's like I can imagine his whole camp would have been like, don't engage in wrestling, don't engage in grappling with this guy. Like let's keep it on the feet and let's try and knock him out. So when he shot a takedown on me, I was kind of like, okay, yeah, like he's stuck. And then in the second round, he was trying to wrestle again. I, turned things around, changed the position, put him up against the fence. And I said to him in there while I was in there with him, like I said to him, I was like, it's my turn to wrestle now. And I just felt him kind of go, like just wilt after that. And it was just like, okay, well, Like, you know, this is one of those things like people, I guess people, you're not going to know until you experience it for yourself. But like, I'm a big guy for this weight class. I'm very, very strong. And even then, I feel like people they don't really even have a realistic sort of outlook on what to expect when they're in there with me. Because like you said, you know, their last fight, especially, I think that showed it that if you think that you're going to come in here and you just have to worry about my wrestling and my grappling, you're going to do yourself a disservice. So by all means, I tell people like, please approach me with that singular mindset that you think I'm only going to, you know, have that one path to victory. And then, like you said, you're going to have a problem eventually. But like one thing's for certain, especially, you know, if you give me that opportunity and you give me that window, I'm going to submit you. It's going to happen, you know, and I can do that off my back. I can do that on top of you. I can do that off the cage. Like I can do it everywhere at any time. Um, I almost sort of would compare it to Oliveira's ability to do that, but with minus the taking unnecessary damage part.
Mhm. And you know what's interesting though is like despite all of your success in Eternal MMA, you fought in some big cards before, you fought in some very high profile fights, and you're like the perennial underdog every single time you go out there. You and Martinez have that in common. Every single time you guys make the lockout, everybody and their brother thinks you're like the blue corner, you're going to lose. It's just really interesting. You guys don't really seem to get the respect that you both rightly have earned. Martinez is the exact same way. I feel like he is considered an underdog for almost every single one of his fights as well.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, but I kind of embrace it. And then you know that's something that I kind of have always I've looked at even before I started training at freestyle and started, you know, sort of doing the work daily with Volk. I kind of adopted that from watching him go through the scene here in Australia, and then obviously with the UFC and stuff like that. You know, he's constantly kind of up to the point he's at now. He was constantly just being counted out and being like, "Oh nah," like he's just an underdog, and it kind of leaves you with a chip on your shoulder. And I like that. I like when people are like, "Oh no, nah, this you know this dude's not gonna win. He doesn't have a chance," or something like that, because I know I'm going to go out there and do what I do, and I'm going to get the result. But I also know that everyone that bets on me is going to benefit from it, and that makes me very happy.
Hey, absolutely. And you know, one of the things that I think when I think about you though, and when I think about your approach to like the fights, I'm always thinking in the back of my mind, I'm like, you know, the worst thing you can do is like is say all that stuff about him. I was like, if you really want to like fuck with Justin, put him in the red corner and tell him he's gonna win. Because nobody ever says that about him. So I was just kind of thinking that, like, oh man, like you know, you get so used to that blue corner mentality. It then it becomes kind of strange when people are like, no, I think you're the better man. I think you're gonna win. And some fighters are like, oh man, like that kind of throws me for a loop. Like I have to kind of tell people, like, you know, don't say good things about me. I've heard that before, and it's kind of strange.
Yeah, it's MMA is like it's just a weird sort of it's a
Psychological
weird
trip, I'm
sport. Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
it's a weird sport for that. Like, but I mean, you can't really let at any point, even when you are successful and you're killing it, you kind of it's up to you to sort of keep your own, I guess, mentality in check. Like, you know, even when things are going well, like this year for me, I've been, you know, it's been a busy year for me. I've been on a tear, you know, back to back fights and things are going really well. And obviously the success is there, but you don't really, I haven't even like stopped to smell the roses and think about it too much. Like it's cool. Don't get me wrong. It's cool that, you know, there's these things that are starting to click together and, you know, I'm like, the clear number one featherweight in the region. It's like in my eyes, and it's not even close. And I felt like that at the start of the year, but now it's like kind of, you know, I think I've opened other people's eyes to that now a bit more. But I don't even really I haven't even really given myself the chance to soak that all in or anything like that. And then even sort of let it sort of sit. It's just kind of been straight back in. Let's work. Let's prepare for the next thing. Let's keep improving. And I feel like that's the approach you got to have. Like, and I'm just fortunate that I have people around me that aren't giving me, you know, they're not telling me what I want to hear at any point. It's always just what I need to hear and sort of
Mhm.
keeping me in check, and I'm keeping myself in check. Um, and at the end of the day, I think too, you know, like being a dad, like at the end of the day, you know, I walk out of that gym or I come back from these fights, like my daughter doesn't give a shit that, about Eternal or the fact that I'm like the number one featherweight. Like she doesn't care. She just like, I'm just dad, right?
Mhm.
So I don't have the sort of ability to sit there and dwell on things and be like, oh, and even just because I have other things to focus on, I just go back to normal, go back to the gym, go back to the, being a dad, and I just carry on. And I think that's a benefit for me. And I think that's why you're going to see me continue to sort of progress on this, trajectory that I'm at, because I like, I'm just staying focused, doing the work, staying humble, and just kind of focusing on what I need to focus on at the time that I need to focus on it. Like I don't even give myself the opportunity really to dwell on things. Like after this fight, yeah, there'll be like a little bit of a, like maybe a 2 week, 3 week break there where I can like maybe sit back and go, man, what a year. Like that was a cool year, like 4 fights, and kind of soak it in a little bit. But then I'll be straight back in camp getting ready for Eternal in February, and then potentially stepping up for a UFC call up if something happens, or just, yeah, you never know. You're right. So I'll be straight back into business mode.
I,
Um,
I think it's one of those things where, just kind of as an outsider observing, um, it's a complicated sport because any other sport that you watch, whether it's football or basketball or whatever the case may be, like you win the game and it's like, yeah, we won the game, like fuck yeah, everyone's excited, right? But then like with MMA, you could put on an absolute dominant display, and then you'll hear some like a fighter in a post fight interview. And I think some of them aren't just saying it like to fake humility. I think they're really like this. They're like, I came out here, I made some mistakes with my footwork, and he shot on me. I should have saw that. Like I should have identified the level change. But and it's like, oh yes, but like even when you play football, the other team's gonna get a goal every now and then. Like things are gonna
yeah.
happen. You're not gonna be perfect every single time. Like you just won a major fight. Like it's okay to like clap yourself on the back a little bit because you're doing something that
Mm.
not a lot of humans can do in the first place. But to do it at that level, I mean, I think that's special. So I hope like one day, whenever the time's right for you, you reflect back on your 2022 and think about just how special it was. Because you're talking about fighting against some of the top talent in Australia, and you're like not just beating these guys, you're finishing them. And I think that says a lot about just kind of where you are at this stage in your journey.
Yeah, it's obviously, yeah, exactly right. Like I mean, I'll like obviously I'll take the time to do that and sort of soak that all in, and relish on that a little bit, and then get back to focus on what I want to do for 2023. But like, that's the thing too. I look at some of these other featherweights and I look at some of these other people, and I'm just kind of like, I don't get the sort of mentality or the approach. And it's like you got to be undeniable, right? You can't say no to opportunities, and you got to cement yourself by doing it, by putting yourself out there and taking these risks. And I feel like I've done that. And numbers don't lie at the end of the day, man. Like you said, it's my fourth fight this year. I'm 3 fights back to back against top dudes. The last guy I just fought, he was undefeated. I handed him his first loss, and I finished my last 3 fights back to back. Like in my last, I'm like 4-1 in my last five. You know, and you look at the work that I'm doing, like that speaks for itself. Like, and even with this fight with Diego, yeah, we previously fought each other 5 years ago. Um, but like I keep saying, like, and people, because it's not even like I don't even let myself get really affected by it, but I do think that people kind of just need to look at stuff for what it is sometimes. Like, look at the numbers from when we fought the first time to now. I think he's like gone 5-4 since we fought the first time. His last few fights, he's like 2-3 in his last five, I think, or something like that. You know, it's and you look at me, like, uh, I'm like, yeah, I've been killing it since we last fought. And, I've got a few other losses on my record up in weight at short notice, but, that's a gamble that I chose to take. Sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. But I feel like it's all compounded and gotten me to the point I'm at now. And then that's why you're seeing what I'm able to do in the cage now, and achieve what I'm achieving now, because all of that factors in. It's all experience, and it's all what you take out of it and, you know, use moving forward, right? You can, like, even if you lose, you can't just take a loss and go the same way you just said. You've got to pat yourself on the back when you are killing it and you do something good. You can do that with a loss too, right? You can go, all right, I lost. okay, why'd I lose? Okay, I lost because I did this or I faltered here. Okay, but what was I doing in that loss that was good? Okay, I did this, my footwork maybe was on point. I did this, I stuffed all the takedowns. I was working a 1-2 head kick combination all camp, and I landed that a few times. It was whatever. Like there's still positives to take out and things to apply. So I feel like you just need to continuously do that and be realistic with it. But at the end of the day, man, numbers don't lie. And if anyone is looking at this fight and expecting that it's going to go the same way as the first fight, or that it's the same person walking into that cage, like they're going to be in for a very, very, very nasty surprise.
I have to tell you, I know it's still early. This is the very first time I pulled up the poll. 89% of all of the pollsters are saying that you're going to win.
I'm I
Still early, but I
It's
gotta
still
tell
early,
you,
but
that's a first for me. That's a first for
yeah,
me.
I haven't seen that for a, I haven't seen, I don't think I've seen that very often.
Yeah, it's a first. By initial appearances, the fighting community is favoring you. It's a bit odd for people who don't know a whole lot about your opponent, Diego Pereira. I hope I said his name right. Apologies to you, Diego, if I got it wrong. But what is it about this guy? Like this is an opponent that you're familiar with. You've seen this guy. You fell short against him in 2016, 2017, which was a minute ago. But nobody. This isn't a static game. Both men change. You've gone on. You've taken your fights. He's gone his path as well. He's got an 8-6 record. You got a 10-5 record, and they're billing this fight as the co-main event for the 145-pound strap. I mean, to close out the year for a card of this magnitude. I mean, that's got to. You probably are feeling a little bit more maybe build up on this card as opposed to some of the other Eternals.
Yeah, a little bit. It's obviously the end of the year card. It's a big card. And yeah, Diego and I have a history. Like we obviously fought each other, and then people might not know. I guess after that we became teammates. We trained at the same gym for a while. After that, we cornered each other for fights. We kind of grinded through together, had some success together and stuff like that. So, I still consider him to be like a friend. Like I don't hate the guy. Like I don't have no ill will towards the guy. It's not like I want to see him
Hey, you're playing
like
you're playing football against him. He just is in the
exactly.
way. He's in the
He's
way.
just yeah. I don't. It's not like I want to see the dude. Like it's not like I want to beat him and then like I don't want him to go on and do well and have like rebound or anything like that. Like I don't have any ill will towards the guy. He's just in my way and he's I've got to go out there and do my job and that's exactly what I'm gonna do. And like yeah, obviously we know each other quite well. But even in saying that, the person that trained with him and shared the mats with him and the person that's standing in front of him, now it's immensely, immensely different. So um, I think, yeah, it's all going to sort of factor in. But Diego's, he's a very talented dude, man. Diego's biggest thing is like I've seen him obviously in the gym, and then I've fought him before and everything like that. And I've seen him like in other fights, and I've cornered him and stuff like that. Like he can beat. He's got some world class skills when he's on. That's his biggest thing. He's a bit like Donald Cerrone in the sense that if he's on and switched on and he's mentally shows up, he's a world beater, man. He's beast, absolute monster.
Michael Johnson.
Yeah, like can beat anyone you put in front of him. And then there's other days he shows up and he's just not there, and then like he loses to people he's got no business losing to.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of like, what is going on? And that's something that he's had since before I fought him, before we became teammates, before we became friends. Like that's something I've seen on and off. Like when I watched him in the scene before I even went pro, I saw him fight on a few cards and stuff like that. And I was always just kind of thrown off by that because you'd see him go from one fight where he's just absolutely murdered someone to just the next fight, and he's just not there. He's just not showing up, and you're kind of like, man, what is going on? Like if this guy can get a hold of that or get get that sorted out, he's going to just be able to go on an absolute tear. But it's just, I guess it's something that Yeah, it's something that I guess he's trying to, they must be trying to work on, or something that he's
Mhm.
got to figure out for himself. But at the end of the day, like, even if you're showing up and you're mentally on and you're switched on, being across from me in there is, it's no easy task. And then if you throw that into the mix where, you've got to worry about your mental thing and get yourself hyped up or get yourself in the right frame of mind or whatever, man, that's a whole nother hurdle that, that's going to just make things worse. I do think with this fight, even though the first time we fought, he got the better of the fight, he won. And I saw something that he said the other day on a podcast where he was talking about that, like how he's talking about that's got to be etched in my brain. I've got to still think about that and that. I'm like, I don't, but I feel like the mental pressure or the pressure of this whole thing is going to be a lot more focused on him than it is on me, because I'm coming off a loss against him, right? Like,
Mhm.
he's the guy that already beat me. It's like a lot more pressure on him, but also you've got to know that because we've trained together, because we spent all that time together, we've the years that we spent working together and the sort of interactions we've had and stuff like that. You've got to know that mentally there's a lapse there,
Mhm.
and I can bring that out of you,
Mhm.
because when the game plan isn't going the right way, and I put you in a position where you have to step out of your comfort zone, and now mentally you're starting to lapse, you're not staying switched on. Like, man, that's going to be a problem. And then you give me 5 rounds potentially where I can do my job and do my work. I just, it's going to be a long night in the office for him. It's going to be, yeah, it's going to be a tough night for Diego. Like I said, it's a shame that it's him that has to be in front of me, but I've got to go through him to take what I want.
And this is like a winner take all kind of sport. You got to do what you got to do, and I'm sure he feels the exact same way about you. Like,
Oh,
hey,
100%.
I
He's
mean,
coming in to kill me. He's
yeah,
coming in to kill me.
and it's all business at the end of the day. You guys can probably go to the pub and have a beer afterward. But can you talk to me, Justin? Like Eternal MMA, for people who don't know, if you're American watching this, or in the UK or something like that, it is the premier mixed martial arts promotion in Australia. It is like the biggest one. It is the most important one. And when you win a title in Eternal MMA, people take notice. And that's got to, like, that puts you in the driver's seat going into the new year. Now I think you're in a position where you need to, and I know you probably already do this, but you also need to kind of be thinking in two different realms. What's going on in the Eternal space, but also what's going on in the UFC space? Who are the 45ers that are fighting? Where are these cards at? Because if somebody gets COVID, if somebody gets hurt, and they need a guy, you're going to be on that short list of people that they call, particularly if they're trying to have some of these fights in the Middle East or something like that, because it's way easier to snatch guys like you and throw them up there as opposed to maybe getting, an American and sending them all the way to the Middle East to compete.
Yeah, obviously, I'm constantly watching and observing what's happening in the sport, and I know that my position of where I'm at right now is, there's a lot more at stake. Um, so yeah, certainly I'm gonna, like, with a win in December, I'm gonna be ready for whatever comes my way. Like I said, I'm gonna be in camp preparing to fight in February, and if an opportunity comes up and something happens, or I'll be ready. I got a passport. Like, I'm good to go. Like, you make the call, I'm good. It doesn't matter. And I've stepped in, and I think that's what benefits me with some of the fights I took at short notice and stuff like that. Like, they can look at that and go, oh, like if we call this guy, like he'll show up. Like, I've taken fights at the weigh-ins when people have missed out, like opponents have pulled out. So, like, like if they call me, they could call me with 12 hours and go, yo, we need you, and we'll make it work. We'll figure it out.
Justin, I'm really, really excited that you're getting this opportunity against a worthy opponent on a big card. Can you talk to me a little bit, just like winning the Eternal Featherweight title? What would something like that mean for you? Considering your backstory, considering maybe some of the choppy waters that you've had to endure in the past, now to potentially getting the 145-pound title, potentially moving up to the UFC, like when you like think about the totality of all that, that's got to be kind of just like surreal to think about.
Yeah, it's going to be. I mean, winning the belt is cool, like that. But that's, I mean, it's less about that belt, like, than it is about the, like you said, the culmination of all the work that's been put in and what it means. It's more about the meaning behind it. It is the top organization in the country. It's the most prestigious belt you could have because, like you said, people take notice. The other day at the 284 Q&A conference they did with Falk and Whitaker, someone asked that, and they said that they have their partnerships with some of these promotions like Eternal, and they're keeping an eye on who's rising to the top in their divisions and who's doing the work that they're doing. So, I know that when I step into that cage in December, and if I go out there and do what I know I can do, a lot of people are going to be taking notice of that, and winning that belt. It means more than just being the 145 champ at Eternal. It's like it really cements me as like the number one guy in the region without a doubt, and the person who is right there to make that step up and to start fighting these world class fighters. But yeah, it'll be crazy. Like I'm sure I'll shed a tear or two in there when that belt's wrapped around my waist. Like, cause it's been quite the journey so far, and it's gonna, there's a lot of things to sort of factor in and look at, and this game is so brutal because like I think people don't really sometimes forget, like, even this year, like fighting 3 times back to back, like that's like a 10-12 week commitment for each one of those fights. There's a bunch of factors outside of that are in, and like I said, like in the same sense, I haven't been able to stop and smell the roses with the success I've had. I haven't even been able to do that with some of the other stuff outside of fighting, with things that have happened on and off that I've kind of just had to put in the back of my mind. And I'm like, okay, when I'm done and I'm done competing for the year, I can sit back and reflect on all these things. And like, that's the sort of sacrifice you had to make. Like, there's, there's over the years, there's so many things that I can compile together and look at and go, holy crap, man. Like, I've sacrificed so much for this sport, but this is like the moment that it's led to. Like, I got to go out there and do my thing, just believe in myself and go out there and do what I know I can do. And then I can look back and go, all right, this was the crucial moment that set up the real journey for me and the real part of my career. And that's going to be fighting in the UFC against the top competition in the world and really showing, people what I'm capable of, and why I believe I'm going to one day walk away from this sport as a world champion.
I think it's one of the things that I admire about people like you is because there's like a journey and there's been adversity in the past. There's been things that you've had to overcome to get to where you are. I think that's what makes you relatable to the common man, because for the common man, we need to have a reason to turn in. It's tough sometimes to like find what makes a cage fighter relatable to you, but it's there if you look for that. Not everyone's like a huge MMA nerd like me. Not everyone else is up at 4 a.m. US time watching you fight. So I don't expect a lot of people up here yet to know who you are, but I do think that's going to happen very, very soon. I'm expecting to see you compete in the UFC in 2023, making your walk at the Apex, hopefully at a big event like in Madison Square Garden. I think that would be amazing. I think that you need to invade Madison Square Garden and fight there. We should make that happen. I think we should make that happen.
100%, man. I'm gonna, as soon as I, that's the thing, as soon as I get my foot in the door, it's gonna be about, just emulating what I've been able to do so far and just looking to continue to achieve those successful moments, and cement those things and tick off those boxes that I have for myself. Um, the only difference is going to be I'm going to do it with a few more eyeballs watching me. Really, at the end of the day.
Fighting is fighting. Of course, fighting in the Shark Tank, as you're well accustomed to. It's not news to you. It's something that you're very, very, you've become comfortable in the uncomfortable. And I think that's a really good measure of a very, very good fighter. Justin, I want to give you the opportunity. I know that you have a lot of people that you need to thank. Who are they? And who would you, what are some cool things that you'd like to say before we sign off?
Yeah, obviously, my the my sort of big success comes from obviously my coaches, Joe and Alex. They're like, yeah, they've obviously led to me being able to have this massive success and showcase these improvements in my game, fight to fight, and continue to sort of not just be a better mixed martial artist, but sort of emulate myself and be a better person across the board, you know? So that's always a benefit. Um, my daughter, Justice, she's just obviously like my biggest sort of driving force. So, you know, every time I go out there and compete, I know I'm sort of setting an example for her. She's going to be able to one day look at that and use it as an example to pursue whatever she wants. And that makes me feel more content than anything else possibly ever will. And that includes like, you know, all the money and success and anything that comes with this sport. You know, that's the one thing I look at and I know I'm going to be able to like set a foundation for her that's going to benefit her moving forward. All my sponsors, CMBT, Eddie's Barbershop here in the beautiful Shell Harbour region. You know, Enhanced, you know, all these companies that get behind and kind of like, you know, support an up and coming athlete like myself. All my teammates, you know, all the amateurs that we have in the gym that are coming up doing their thing. Like, you know, at the end of the day, these are people I'm sharing the mats with. They're starting their journey and you know, and they're people that are there when I'm grinding through camps and stuff like that. And as much as I'm, you know, part of their camps, and I feel privileged to be able to do that as well. Um, and then, you know, the biggest thing I sort of want to, I guess, shout out there is anyone that is a fan of this sport and watches this sport and you know like takes the time to support the fighters that they like and you know and even if they're tuning in just to see someone get their ass whooped, like that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you're supporting us athletes being able to go out there and do our thing, and I think that's just something really cool. Like never in my life did I ever think that I'd be able to, you know, compete in a sport like MMA and do it in front of people, and then the amount of people that I do it in front of just continues to increase and increase and increase. I think that's really 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 cool, and feel like it's only going to get better. So I'm thankful for all of that.
I think you have a much bigger platform than even you realize. You're an exciting fighter. And I think that there are people all over the world that are going to love to see you fight. If you are stateside and want to watch Justin compete live, it happens on Friday, December 2nd at 4 a.m. Eastern Time. And for you, doing a quick conversion in my head, that's got to be the cards probably starting at what, 6 o'clock p.m. on the 2nd for you.
Yeah, yeah, about that, about 6 7 p.m. our time.
Yep. So there you go. I will be watching your fight. That is probably going to happen on Friday morning, roughly around 6:30 to 7 a.m. For
Right
me.
about that.
But I will be watching, Justin. It's always a pleasure to watch you fight. Thank you for being on my show again, and we will do it again when you are the champion.
Exactly, we're going to for sure do that again. And for everyone that's going to wake up and watch me fight, don't worry, I'll get it done quickly. You'll have time to get back in bed, get a few hours sleep, and then wake up and start your day.